welcome back to another episode of the Mindsets podcast. I'm your host, Angus Cook. I've been doing this for quite a few episodes now, but I'm really excited about today's one. I'm joined by Lauryn, who has come all the way from Wales to be here. Now, as a bit of a background for you guys, if you are new here, this podcast, we talk to athletes of all different backgrounds about their journey, whether they've had struggles physically, struggles mentally, the aim being that they can tell us how they got through them, how they got to the level they're at today, and then we can learn from it and hopefully be performance athletes ourselves, or at least pretend that we are. But before we kind of delve into Lauryn's story, I will hand over to her to do her own introduction. So welcome on board.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm Lauryn. I'm a Welsh heptathlete, so I'm sure we'll delve into what that means. And I also study medicine. I'm plant-based, and I'm a huge mental health ambassador as well.
Superstar, basically, ideal for the podcast. So before we kind of get into that, as you mentioned, we will go into explaining what heptathlon is, because I've watched it at the Olympics, but I don't know the ins and outs of it. That's what I'm excited about from today as well, is we do show and tell straight away. So this gives us a bit of a chance to see what's important to you, potentially. We've had all sorts of strange things, from Lucky Charms to people's race suits, that kind of thing. But you've got something a little bit different today, and it's something you keep on you permanently. Do you want to take us into it?
Yeah, I guess it's similar to a Lucky Charm, but I've just got a little bracelet here from my sister, and this from my mum, and she got it for me because like elephants represent strength. So I just keep them on me all the time. So if I'm ever struggling in the middle of an exam or like just before a race, I just like have a little feel of it or look at it, and I just know that the people I love and the people I care about and the things I care about are still with me, and I'll be fine. So yeah, that's my little show and tell.
What I think, what I'm interested in is, I am a fiddler, right? Oh. So I never had a fidget spinner. I'm not one of those kids, but I would always gravitate towards messing with something. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then you'll probably see at some point I'll be messing with my watch strap or something like that.
Too.
It's the reason I have a pen normally when I start this podcast, and I always have to put it down because I know I'll end up like taking it apart or like clicking it. Is that part of it as well? Is that you gravitate towards those things that are on you, and they kind of bring you a sense of sort of neutrality? Is that a word?
Yeah, I think it is.
Like being neutral?
Yeah, no, I think I play my watch a lot and baubles on my wrist.
Yeah.
But I don't know why. I only ever think or look at these when I really like think about my family. So I don't think it's like a fidgety thing. It's just like it grounds me in times when I need it. So yeah.
Is that like a pre-race, pre-exam, or
definitely.
Like in exams as well sometimes?
Yeah, definitely. Like I was struggling with a few questions in exams very recently, and like I just look at this and I'm like, no, like I know I can do it. Like everybody back home knows I can do it, and yeah, it just gives me a bit of like an arm. I really like it. So,
that's really nice. Well, talking of back home, let's dive back to how everything started, really. What was your sort of first discovery of sport?
I've literally loved sport ever since I could walk, and I walked at 8 months, so my parents knew like I was just mad anyway. So I just did every sport I could do at school. In fact, I asked to join the boys all the time because I was sick of just like not doing what I wanted to do. So I used to race the boys all the time. And then I did gymnastics to a high level until I realised it wasn't good for my personality. It didn't really fit who I was. And then team sports at the time didn't really suit me, so I just gravitated towards track. So I was really lucky to represent Wales. I was quite young at that, like 13. I was like one of the youngest athletes to represent Wales.
Was that in track or in
Yeah, in track and field. But I was just sprinting at the time, and then as I tried a couple of events throughout the years for like points for like a team event, then I noticed I was quite okay at them all, and I'm quite an undecisive person, so I just stuck to them all. But I actually didn't take it seriously till I turned 19, and then COVID hit. So really, I've always loved sport, I've always been active, but I haven't really been an athlete and taken it seriously until COVID. And as you can imagine, COVID really impacted a lot. So I feel like I'm still like really only now getting into it. So fingers crossed it's a lot more to come.
Something that I would like to point out in that your foundation effectively came from gymnastics. What sort of gymnastics were you doing?
So I did artistic gymnastics. So we did like floor, tumbling, and bars were my favourite actually. So, and I've noticed a lot of athletes used to do ballet or gymnastics. So I think it gives you like a really good like base core strength, and allows you to develop your musculature when you're really young.
This is exactly what I was going to say. I think that if you look at some of the gymnastics athletes that are pros or at the Olympics today, not only do a lot of them look incredibly strong, but like you said, it's learning how to control your body.
Yeah.
Especially when you move into something like track and athletics. I've had the pleasure, I think I'd call it pleasure, of doing some sprint training, which can be extremely tiring because you're using so many different muscle groups. But the thing that I struggled with coming into doing that sort of training later on in life is I didn't have the body control.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you were good at gymnastics at that young age, you're kind of understanding how to control your limbs. Your balance is going to be good. Your core is going to be stable.
Exactly.
And then you said it earlier on a voice note you sent to me on like a summary of things we could talk about today, but you said that you just happened to be quick.
Yeah.
Which is kind of how you got into it. So sprinting, you were still young, so I imagine the distances weren't crazy.
No.
But did you enjoy sprinting the most?
Yeah, I think I always did cross country as well. I always just enjoyed just pushing my body to the limits. It was just like the biggest outlet I've had throughout my entire life, and it still is. But yeah, sprints was like my favourite. Like I said, I always wanted to race the boys. Like even in primary school, like when I was like in year 3, I'd try and beat the boys in year 6. Like that was just my thing. And I do think gymnastics gave me like a really good base because you just can use the ground, and I never understood how people couldn't sprint, and I guess that just naturally took me to track. So
for sure. So with your kind of years of track experience, you were competing for Wales at 13, which is obviously very young, but then was most of your competition throughout like a normal year? Was that happening through school, or was that actually happening for a club outside of school as well, or was it mainly just club outside of school?
So I started with school. So like I said, I was naturally quick. So we do like school sports hall and then the school's athletics, and then you'd go on to like the next stage then if you'd win a race or whatnot. So I represented Welsh schools initially, and then that obviously got me into club athletics. And I took it quite seriously when I was like 13, 14, 15. I was like mad in love with athletics. And that's when Jessica Ennis, the British heptathlete, won gold. So that was like key for me in keeping me in athletics. But funny enough, between 15, so I really hurt myself doing a long jump takeoff when I was 15. And then a lot of things happened back home, which is why I'm like huge on mental health now. So between the ages of 15 and 19, I was really lost in sport. And I always kept that physical element. I was always in shape, always went to the gym and continuing to my own training. But I didn't have like specific goals, and I really just lost myself in general throughout those years. So that's when I came back to it at 19 and thought, okay, I actually have a good chance of being a really good athlete, and I found a really lovely coach, and yeah, like hopefully it's still just building that now.
So did you go into heptathlon from seeing Jessica Ennis Hill do great things, or were you already being guided by the Welsh team, or was it kind of just your own, like you mentioned before, you were just kind of good at a lot of them, so you just wanted to do them all?
Yeah, so it's just my love and joy for sport anyway. If they wanted someone to do the short part, I'd give it a go. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't very good at it, but I was quite naturally good at like the long jump, and I enjoyed the hurdles. So I've done all of the events from quite early on, like 14, 15. And I did think about doing the heptathlon, and I think I did a few like indoor pentathlons. And I actually have like the Welsh like pentathlon under 15 record at one point, which is quite fun. But yeah, I just kind of lost myself then and didn't really have focus until I turned 19. I thought, oh crap, if I want to do this, like I need to do it, and I want to do it properly. And I found a good coach then. So yeah, I just naturally fell into it and then decided to pursue it. But I'm still quite open to other sports, to be honest.
Yeah, and still
floating away.
I think that's the thing. If you're a jack of all trades, and not necessarily a master of none, but like you are a jack of all trades and doing these different things, when you are discovering the sport, and when you're in that time where you kind of lost direction a little bit, what I'm interested in knowing is was it caused somewhat in the sport of heptathlon by having certain weaknesses or not enjoying some of the ones that you were having to do?
I don't think it was ever heptathlon in particular. There's a lot of reasons really. It's like university, boys, funny enough. And then things back home. But in terms of like the sport, what stopped me staying in it, isn't it? It's like some people, their world could be crumbling around them, but their goals within sport keep them to it. What made me drift was the fact I didn't have an overall coach to look at me. I was overtraining, I was always getting injured, because obviously I was so into sport at 14, 15, I started picking up injuries. And I didn't know why, I didn't know how to manage my training, nutrition. I turned vegetarian and everyone was telling me not to, but obviously my beliefs caused me to step that out, and I'm still, now vegan to this day. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons why I kind of slipped out of sport, but luckily I got back into it. So yeah, I'm grateful for that.
So for anyone that's been sat here thinking, okay, heptathlon sounds great, there's loads of sports involved in that, but you have no idea what that is, don't worry. I've been a good podcast host and I've gone away and done the research. But not only have I done the research and tried to memorize it, I've made sure I'm not going to fuck it up because I've written it down. So the 7 events are 100 meter hurdles, high jump, shot put, 200 meter sprint, long jump, javelin, and 800 meters.
That's it, yeah.
Nailed it. Thank you, Google. Now, there's more to it than that, because you don't just win heptathlon by winning all 7 events. And you don't just win by necessarily winning most of the events, because there's a point system. But in the point system, there's also benchmarks, which is just, now it's all starting to get a bit more confusing. Would you mind teaching the village idiot what on earth goes on?
Yeah, I gotta say, I don't think I'm much better than the village idiot, because some heptathletes have just calculated the scores within their heads, and they know, you know, for example, like 160 in the high jump gets you a certain number of points. But I've not done that research, because I'm a bit strange and I like to go off just what I do on the day, and I don't like to know what I'm scoring. But it basically goes off scores, so it's not the position. So a lot of people think, oh, if you've won the first hurdles race, you have more points than somebody else. You will in that event, but it's not based on positions, it's based on your time. So obviously, in general, the quicker you run, the further you throw, the further you jump, the higher you jump, the more points you accumulate. And what makes this event, in my opinion, hard is the events aren't equal. So the highest scoring events is high jump and hurdles. Now, I'm not notoriously good at the high jump, actually, so that doesn't fond well for me. And then javelin, it's really, really hard to score high points in. So, for example, you're going to have to throw 15 meters more than somebody else to gain a lot of points. And then in the 800, it's something like 18 or 19 points per second. So you can calculate it. So it's quite like a big table of numbers, which, like I said, I haven't calculated. But you can also go online and just plonk in the numbers. And basically, as an athlete, you know what your strong events are, you know what your weak events are, and you know what you're looking to achieve. So you can calculate what score you want based on world rankings, or if you want to qualify for the Olympics or whatnot, and you know, I need to get a score at the end of the day. What are my best events? Where can I gain the most points? So I've been really trying to improve my hurdles, because I've lost loads of points on hurdles, and I think, okay, if I can just get down by half a second, that's like 200 points or 250 points, which is huge in heptathlon. So
I was going to ask you, and you don't have to reveal this information if it's going to give your competitors a tactical advantage. Okay. But what are your best to worst? What would you rank your?
Hard. I wonder if my coach would look at this and be like, "You're wrong." So I enjoy the long jump and javelin the most. And again, this is a tough question. So in terms of, I'll go what's good or bad to a heptathlete. So my javelin's very good for a heptathlete, but it's not good for a javelin thrower. Whereas a lot of heptathletes can be very good hurdler and heptathletes. So you'll find that as heptathletes, we'll be in like the British final 100 meter hurdles, but we will never even come close to like the throwers, for example. So for a heptathlete, I'm a good javelin thrower and I'm a good long jumper. And then I'm quite average at the rest of the events. But I'm not particularly really bad at any event, except for some reason my shot put has just gone out the window. I've been good in the past, but a lot of it's technique. And there's something I've just done that's causing it to not go very far right now. But you deviate a lot, and things chop and change. But yeah, in general, I'd say long jump probably is my best, and then javelin.
Something that you mentioned there is that you're mentioning how good you are for a heptathlete, which some people might be like, well, why aren't you good for someone who does it? You're spending 1/7 of the time training it.
Exactly. And not even that sometimes. I actually realise, so like I said, long jump's one of my favourite events. But because of logistical things and being in medical school as well, which I guess we'll come on to later, but I haven't even trained as much long jump as I'd like to. So to put it in perspective, so the best long jump in the UK at the minute is jumping 640, 650. So 6 meters, 50 centimeters. And I'm jumping like 590. So it's not an awful lot, but it is at the same time in long jump. And I keep thinking to myself, why why am I nowhere near that? Like, what can I do to improve over that 6 meters and be competitive with the best long jumpers in the UK and then thus go forward? And I realised me and my long jump coach sat down. I've done 5 long jump specific sessions between October and now. So within nearly a year, I've done 5 long jump sessions.
One every 2 months, roughly.
Yeah, that's literally probably how many long jump sessions a long jumper will do within a week or 2. So, and I'm wondering, why am I 40 centimetres down on them? So, yeah, it's a bit complicated. And sometimes I think, will I drop down an event? How good could I be after an event if I did just that? And that's the complicated thing about being a heptathlete or someone who loves sport and has the opportunity. It's making those decisions as well.
You have to be pretty good at juggling, essentially, as a heptathlete, because, as you said, you've got weaknesses, but if you spend too long working on your weaknesses, your strengths suddenly don't become your strengths. Yeah. And if there's a point system involved where, let's say your weakness was actually javelin, so you spent ages working on your javelin, but you said it's actually really not that beneficial for you to improve that much at javelin, then balancing the time out, I'm glad that I'm not doing it. I'm glad that you seem to have got it under control, but you're also balancing so many other things. So, you're also a medical student.
Yeah.
How on earth did you get into being a medical student?
I just fell into that as well, really. So COVID hit, I started doing the heptathlon and just went back home, and obviously you had to train, and my coach just said, if you want to become a good heptathlete, once all this COVID business is over, you need a strong core, you need to go back to like all the basics. So I started training all the basics. I finished my first degree, which is in like a medical genetics, medical sciences background. So I always liked science. I've always been very academic. I was very lucky that even though I didn't go to good schools and I struggled a lot growing up, I always somehow did well academically. So I'm very, very grateful for it. So I thought, what do I do with my life now? I don't want to, my degree at the time allowed me to work in a lab. And I was like, that's not me. Like I'm a really people's person. I'm not going to sit in a lab. So what do I do? And I thought, I'm just going to take a punt at it and apply for medicine. And I thought about veterinary as well. But I thought about all of my life goals and what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about like global health and politics. And I thought being a doctor would give me like a good stead for that. So I applied. I literally studied for a week. So I was in Cyprus 3 weeks before a huge entrance exam that people were studying like months for. And I thought, I'm not going to get it. But I took like fate in his hands. I was like, I'm not nervous for this. Like if it's for me, I'll get in. And I got in. So yeah, and then I'm somehow still doing it. I have a love-hate thing for medicine. Sometimes I feel like it takes away from who I want to be. And medicine's very notoriously, it has to be your life. You're just a doctor. And that's not me. So at the minute, I feel like I'm rowing a boat in a different direction to everybody wants, or, not with the tide. And it's really tough because I feel like I'm trying to pave a different way for doctors. But yeah, I'm still here. Hopefully I qualify very soon. And yeah, hopefully I can make change and still be a sports person.
I think it's always quite brave to go against the grain a little bit like that. Like you said, rowing against the tide in a way. But you're handling it at the moment. There's more things that we'll talk about that have made that slightly more difficult recently. But you did have good news. You actually passed one of your tests. You got that news literally in the last 24 hours.
Yeah. I passed an exam yesterday that takes me now into my final year. So I'll have 3 more exams in February and I'll qualify. So fingers crossed, but I'm not going to pretend that it's been easy, and I've had to retake a few exams. But that's what you get for trying to side hustle medicine.
Well, one of the things, if you've got any followers that are listening or people that are currently going and checking out like your Instagram, that kind of thing, what you're about, they'll see that you're an advocate, as you mentioned, for mental health. Yeah. But that's not the line of work you've gone into in sort of medical studies and healthcare. So where does this affiliation with caring about mental health come from as well?
Yeah, so it firstly came from just personal experiences. So like family members struggling with their mental health, and me feeling like I had the sole responsibility for them at some point in my life, and just always been a people's person. I've always had a lot of empathy and so much love to give, and somehow I just find myself gravitated towards caring about what people think of themselves and the world. And obviously at the minute, mental health's a huge thing within our society, and it's wonderful to see that it's more of a thing that people speak about now, which is awesome because it used to be taboo, and I don't think it is anymore. I think it's very much like out in the open, which is really good. And I think mental health equates to physical health just as much. And I am hoping in my medical career So at the minute, I either want to become a GP and then have like a special interest in community mental health and hopefully do side projects and work with charities. So I'm hoping to have an impact or become a psychiatrist. So it does all tie in eventually. But yeah, mental health is just so important. And I don't understand how anyone in this world thinks it's not. It doesn't make sense because physical doesn't exist without the mental health. It just doesn't.
Do you find that the correlation personally between your physical training, physical health, it like has a direct impact on your mental, but also the other way around?
Yeah, absolutely. Like not one is more important than the other. Not one impacts the other anymore. It's completely equal. And I found that in myself. I never really struggled with my mental health until a couple of years ago. I kind of noticed, and I didn't go to the doctors or anything like that. I just kind of recognized symptoms within myself and like even self-doubt, lack of self-confidence, things like that. And I've worked through it, and I just want to help as many people as I can to overcome that, because it's so hurtful to think that somebody is struggling with their mental health, even though they're physically okay. I'm hoping one day like no one will have to feel alone, you know? So that's the goal really.
With your physical health, obviously if you're training, you feel great and you're working towards goals. People who are physically fit tend to be quite goal driven, whether that is they want to achieve a certain number in the gym of reps or something like that, or they're going to go and compete at the Commonwealth Games or something like that and they want to get a PB there. But then one of the most common things with active people is you be active, then you also end up being injured.
Yeah.
And that's something you've had to deal with, as well as all your medical studies and your training this year. You suddenly got injured.
Yeah.
So you broke your foot, right?
Yeah, so I broke my leg doing high jump a few weeks before the Olympics. I wasn't going to compete at them, but I was going to watch them, and I have some of my best friends competing in them. And then obviously I had a reset as well. So it's been pretty tough few weeks, but also grateful, you know, this works out through, I guess. But yeah, it's part of sport. It is part of doing anything physical that injuries or illnesses occur to you. I personally found the leg break not that hard to deal with. Anyone who's dealt with a bone break, it's a very clear-cut diagnosis. You know when it's going to heal, you know it's going to get better. I didn't damage any ligaments, or I had a bit of soft tissue damage, but that was normal. So I found this leg break to be a breeze, but it's because I've noticed my resilience is incredible because I wasn't even fazed by it. It was quite funny actually. I thought it would be me to break my leg before the British Champs, before the Olympics, as I'm studying like for a reset. It would be. And it's because I suffered with chronic pain from just post-COVID. Still don't know where it came from, but it's like a chronic like arthritis. And basically I was in so much pain and had hip weakness for like 2 weeks. And then it like continued, and it ended up nearly 2.5 years of not being able to feel my legs properly, impacting my performances. I was trying to train, and that was a lot harder than an acute injury. So I think my resilience in getting over injuries is a lot better than it was. And I think the only way of getting yourself out of an injury or out of like a slump or, you know, an illness is to identify what it is and just continue every day, like improving yourself. What can you do? What can you focus on? I started seeing a sports psychologist as well to try and like deal with these things. And he says you've got like a red pill and a blue pill, and you've got like a red area. You don't want to go into the red area, so take yourself to the blue. So identify what's your blue area. So mine's like nature, family, you know, focusing on what I can do, such as like today now, I'm not in my boot anymore. So yes, I can't run. Instead of being frustrated and in the red zone of I can't run, I'm so annoyed, what if I'm going to be slow again? I'm in the blue and thinking I can walk now. I couldn't walk 3 weeks ago. So it's like completely changing your mindset and focusing on positives and what you can control. And that's the blue zone. So I found that you can actually Google it. It's like red pill, blue pill. And that mindset helped me a lot through injuries and like setbacks.
Some of the best athletes I've met and also have had on the podcast, the way that they have dealt with things that ordinarily cause such big issues for other people is the ability to be self-aware and take a step back.
Exactly.
In the moment, because it's very, very easy to get caught up in how you're feeling about something at a given time. But if you, and I don't want to sound annoying in terms of take a step back and look at what you're grateful for, at the end of the day, I am a firm believer, not necessarily in that all things happen for a reason, but injuries happen. And I discussed this in the last episode with Charlotte, who was a guest who has gone through recent injuries as well. Injuries happen at the right time and they teach you the lesson you need.
Yeah, totally.
Because if you get injured from overtraining, then it's teaching you how you should train next time.
Yes.
And that's fine. And it gives you the rest to recover from your overtraining elsewhere in your body. And freak accidents and injuries that come at exactly the wrong time, whether they might on the short term seem like they're ruining your career, in actual fact what they're doing is preparing you for life. That's one of the beautiful things about sport.
Exactly.
Is it's directly comparable to life. Things don't always happen right when they should in your head, but getting calloused to that happening makes things in life and things in sport a lot more easy to deal with.
It makes you such a strong, resilient person. Like I said, I in fact I surprised myself in the last few weeks of thinking, right, I can either wallow in self-pity, the fact I've broken my leg, and my mates were out partying with Mondo Duplantis and Noah Lyles, and I thought I could sit here now and be like, oh, poor me, I've done this, that, but I thought, no, I need to suck it up. I failed an exam I shouldn't have because I was doing too much athletics. My mother went, Dad, fuck that, you broke your leg, because God's told you to sit down and study for exams. I completely embraced the fact that I can't heal my bone like this right now. There's nothing I can do. There's no point crying that I can't run. There's no point crying that I've got to do this exam. I want to be a doctor. I need to sit this exam, and I will eventually, the bone will heal and I'll run when it's time to run. So I had to sit in the situation I was, which was sitting in Swansea with a broken leg studying while everyone was out doing God knows. But again, and I think when he said it's annoying when people say, no, be grateful, gratitude's helped me so much and gaining perspective. So like I said, I'm really interested in politics. So I'm really following the whole Palestinian war, Ukrainian war, things like that. And I know it seems far-fetched, but when I really think about it, really, is my life that bad? The fact that I've got to sit an exam to become a doctor when people, unfortunately are in absolute dire situations. So it does help me gain perspective and just be, so gratitude's really, really helped me as well.
I think it's a really good practice as well, because it can gravitate you and really kind of put you back on planet Earth.
Yeah.
When you're kind of in this headspace and cloud of trying to figure out what's going on. One thing that's out of your control though, and what you've been talking about there, is controlling what you can control and nothing else. Something that can happen is external inputs can come in that can get in the way of what you can control. One of the ones I want to talk about is we've gone a little bit over your athletic career, some of the things you've been struggling with mentally as well, but also I dropped it in, you went to the Commonwealth Games, where unfortunately you didn't manage to finish because you did get injured as well, but there's all of these things that you have achieved so far. And in doing my research for today's episode, I typed in your name. I was hoping to go to Power of 10, find some times and that sort of thing. And quite upsettingly, actually, the top two links are the Daily Mail and the Sun, not giving you credit for your athletic performance, but more taking a point on your athletic wear and what you wear when you compete in track, which is a very standard thing. But that's what the headline is. And then they talk about your sport.
Yeah.
What's it like when external factors like media come in and just, I don't want to say shit on you, but effectively they do just come in and shit on you.
Yeah, and they get paid for that, and they don't ask me for any of it. Somehow, again, because of everything that happened to me growing up, and it's made me a resilient person, I've never been impacted by that. But of course, I still sit there and reflect how it impacts views on women, views on sport, and things like that. And of course, it's upsetting, and it does anger me that someone will look at me and think maybe about what I look like over what my body is capable of. And it's interesting, my mum and I have a conversation about this quite often. And she said, well, if you don't want people to view you in that way, then maybe you need to take a step back and change what you wear, or maybe not post, because obviously I post bikini photos. I'm a huge sun baby. I love the beach and I post bikini photos. And she said, well, maybe that's welcome in that. But I think that's the wrong standpoint to have, boycotting it and saying, oh, maybe I need to cover it up so people will view me in a different way. I don't think that's progressive for society. I think I actually need to say, no, I work really hard for my body. Yes, I look good, but it doesn't need to be seen as anything else. And also, I look good because my body's capable of really pretty cool things and running quicker than most of the boys that try and speak to me. So, I think it's not about hiding it, and I don't think it's about being angry. And again, I can't control what others think of me. The only way I can do that is by being me and keep doing what I'm doing, which is try and be a good doctor every day and try and be, you know, a good family member and be the best athlete I can be. And hopefully people eventually will tune into that. And that's why I have a big personality as well, and hope that people think, oh yeah, she looks good. Actually, you know, she does this, that as well. And I say this a lot on my Instagram. I'm like, look first of all, and look again. Like, I'm intelligent and, you know, my body can do a lot. And women aren't just something for people to look at.
I think that's the problem with Instagram as well. If you look at other people that are your age, that aren't necessarily athletes, that aren't necessarily doctors, when they go on holiday, they're taking the same photos and doing the same posts, but like, they're not going to get shit on because it's normal. But then people will go and find someone that is intelligent, performs well, and does all these amazing things as like a mental health ambassador, and they'll look for the thing that they might try and get you on in like a soft spot. And I think that's one of the things that's bad. So if you're listening to this and you're one of those people that's hoping to write one of those edits, go away. There's a final thing I wanted to talk about, which is also part of who you are and is something that you talk about on social media as well. And you have already mentioned is that you are plant-based.
Yes.
You have gone down the vegan route, which I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm not a vegan. But what was your decision to go vegetarian first and then actually to go full vegan?
Yeah. I just kind of see it as like part of my brand and something that I want to, if they want to learn about it and they want to try a bit of vegan or plant-based things, then I'm that kind of athlete, hopefully, to advocate for it. But I first turned vegetarian when I was 15 because I just love animals so much. And I kind of made that link between what was on my plate and what I love. And it just really hit me, like, honestly, so deep in the soul that, like, it's just not for me. And I remember the day I went home to my parents saying I'm vegetarian now and had meat in front of me on the plate. And they really thought, oh, she'll fade out of it. And I just didn't. And like I said, to this day now, like 10 years later, I'm still vegetarian, vegan. I'm going to have a party this year because I'm like, 10 years. But yeah, that was the initial thing. But then what I did was in my first degree, which is about like medical genetics, there's this thing called epigenetics where your genes aren't stable. And this is something I love in medicine is you're born with genes, right? But the expression of those genes change based on your habits. So what you eat, even your mindset and like how positive you are, how much daylight you get, how much sleep you get, your genes are changing. You can literally change your genes based on who you are, what you eat. And this is something I teach younger people. But I started doing some studies on like eggs and meat. And the more I delved into the studies, the more I thought I can actually be vegan and not require any animal products and be strong and fit. And that's the kind of stance I still have now, which is, like I said, if people want to learn about it, if people want to become vegetarian and feel like they can't because they need muscles or they can't perform without meat, I'm hoping to be one of those positive advocates for actually this protein in plants, and it's good protein in plants, and you can be fine without it. So I try to be one of those positive vegans, and it's, yeah, hopefully do okay.
The world, in a similar way, I guess, to you've mentioned that mental health isn't so taboo anymore. Veganism isn't as taboo as it used to be either. It's very easy to go to a restaurant now and see that there is sometimes more than just one item.
Right, way more.
But the kind of capacity of what companies have been able to do with vegan products and turn them into much nicer meals than they maybe have been looked at once or twice. I definitely don't think it's a bad thing for people to eat a little bit less meat. I do think there is overconsumption, and even from my side, sometimes I'm like, I probably should chill out a little bit. But I want to know if you have a go-to favorite meal. What is the favorite vegan meal?
Oh, do you know what? I'm just partial to a good vegan burger. Honestly, if I could just pick anything, it's a good vegan burger. And I'm just outstanding with how good they are. And for me, it's just so exciting. I can eat what I used to eat because it tastes exactly the same or nearly the same for me and better, in my opinion. Genuinely, I feel like my vegan burgers are so much better than I used to eat without an animal dye-in. And like, that's the main thing for me. But the other elements of veganism is it is better for the planet, like you said. And it even goes into like human rights in the end. And actually, just the more I delve into veganism, the more I just feel like it suits how I want to live. And I think more people need to be thinking about what they're consuming. And I don't mean just food now. I mean like what we wear, you know, where we purchase our clothes from. And I think we just need, and it comes under ethical consumerism. And it's not about being perfect. I just want to reduce as much suffering as possible whilst, you know, living and reaching my goals and hopefully making a positive impact.
What I like is that it pretty much, if you imagine the footsteps that you're taking through your life, is that you're trying to make sure that each footstep lands softly and like doesn't leave a wreck behind you, which is something that I think more people should do.
Yeah, exactly.
So I like it. And we're going to have a few people actually asking questions, because we're now into the listener questions section. So we put out a questions box on the Mindsets Instagram. So if you haven't heard of that, it's at mindsets_podcast. Head over to the socials, drop it a follow, and then you can also get involved with every time I have a guest that comes on. I like to do listener questions, which gives you guys a chance to ask exactly what you would want to know about the guest, or maybe get some advice. And it also saves me a job in planning questions. So cheers for that. Now we've picked 3. There were quite a few questions, but we've picked some interesting ones that I think are some different sides to your story. Hey guys, it's Angus in post-production. Apologies for interrupting the episode. I just wanted to draw attention to the background noise that you might be hearing. If you haven't noticed it, I'm sorry for bringing it to your attention, but it won't go on too long. Simply some neighbours to the recording location decided to have a bit of a party, and they were testing their sound system. And trust me, it was working incredibly well. It was very, very loud. So it doesn't go on for too long. And Lauren and I stopped recording for a little bit just to be able to make sure that it doesn't impact the episode too much. So with that said, I will let you get back to listening to it, and I hope you enjoy it. So the first question is about how you keep pushing through your barriers. So when you have setbacks, what is your main motivator to essentially push through them?
Yeah, so I'll go with like personal and then give advice. So personally, I just have always had like a really deep-rooted belief in myself. And if I've set out a goal, I just continue. And I can't really, I know it's not very useful, but I can't really explain as to why there's no option not to keep pushing. So every day I just set goals and tell myself, like, you know, what can I achieve today? Little steps, break things down. Also have like help around you. So obviously when you have a setback, you're not on your own. You ask other people for advice, use the resources. You know, none of us are alone in any situation we're ever in. And yeah, that's like my kind of way of pushing, is breaking it down, set goals, and have help around you. Eventually get out the other end, hopefully.
Nice. And I feel like if you stack and do that enough times, then you become more confident in doing it as well.
Yeah.
Cool. So the next question we've got is about whether or not you take creatine, whey protein for your sports and workout fueling. What's your stance on your supplements? What do you take?
Yeah, so I'm very much with, obviously, I think you should try and get as many nutrients as you should through food. And obviously, again, going back to the plant-based, I think a really heavy diet full of plants and fruit, getting all the minerals and vitamins you can through that. But obviously, doing like really high-level sport and training a lot, you do need something. So quite newly actually to creatine last year in the gym, because my S&C coach told me about it. Obviously, it improves your creatine stores, which is like the very short burst activity. So I just kind of did like the science myself around it, did the research, and then it really, really improved. So yeah, I do take creatine. I do cycle it. So obviously at the minute I don't take creatine, but I am reading a little bit, and there is some evidence for it improving bone health. So I'm thinking about going back on it when I can go back to the gym. Obviously I don't take whey protein, and again, people can do their own research, but I don't think whey and casein, which are animal proteins, they're not very good for you. So I take vegan protein, so it's like rice, brown rice, pea protein and soy protein, so like a mixture of them. And anybody, even if you're not vegan, if you want to have a little read around those different types of proteins, they might help you in different ways. And then I just take vitamin B complex, and I take glucosamine and vegan omega-3s. So try and keep it simple.
Have you been told, or has your coach mentioned collagen or anything based on your bone break as well?
Yeah, funny enough. And yeah, I actually started taking collagen 3 weeks ago, the Healthspan Elite. So yeah, I started taking that, but just plant collagen. And I read the difference between like bovine, marine and plant.
And you take vitamin C when you take your collagen?
Yes, I do actually.
That's another tip. Yeah. So if you're new to collagen, it can help your sort of bone health, but taking it with vitamin C enhances your ability to absorb it a little bit. I think I don't want to go too far into the science, and like you mentioned as well, things like creatine, I think it's a scary word. It kind of sounds a bit like some sort of steroid.
Yeah.
It's something that you do naturally have already in your body. So you get it mainly, I know from what my diet is, I get it mainly from things like beef.
Yes.
So beef is very dense in creatine, but what creatine monohydrate is you have it stored in your muscles, and within that first burst of exercise, if you're thinking about maybe a sprint, something that's very high output in terms of power, the first maybe 5 seconds is where you use that creatine monohydrate store.
5 to 10, yeah, that's it.
So by supplementing a very, very small amount, then what you're actually doing is you're effectively able to increase that amount of time. Sometimes you can almost double. And if you imagine doubling that amount of time that you can give that power output, what that might mean is short term, you might not notice much more than 1 rep. But if you imagine being able to do 1 rep on every set better over the course of a couple of months, your improvement is going to be a much, much greater. And like you said, there's some evidence behind it for bone health. There's also some evidence behind it for brain health.
Yes, my SNC coach mentioned that they've got some new studies on like delirium, cognition, things like that. So that's really interesting.
And what there isn't actually a link of, which is the first fear that people have with it, is hair loss. There's no actual direct. There was one study a while ago about hair loss and creatine, but it has since been disproved. So as far as I'm concerned, it is one of the safest supplements you can take. But interesting to hear about the other things that you're also taking as well.
And I do actually, when I struggled with patellotendinitis, which was the knee injury that stopped me going to the Commonwealth Games, I now take either orange juice or I eat like a satsuma before every gym session. It's really good for your tendons. So if anyone who struggles with that, they might help you.
I didn't know that.
It doesn't hurt, does it?
I can pair that with my like Rice Krispie Squares bar that I usually go for, which is slightly less healthy than a tangerine.
And some people are like, how will you like chill with citrus and but I'm okay with it.
I don't think it's that bad.
Oh, if it doesn't work.
The last question we've got is actually an interesting one. I thought this was going to be a really easy question to answer, but I now get the impression that it might not be. Which do you enjoy more, athletics or medicine?
Or I will never decide between the two. So something like, it's not a word that anyone knows, but I think it's a really interesting one that people should know about. And I guess it might be like the next big thing is like being a multi-hyphen. So I don't believe in just being one thing, doing one thing, or having favourites. So clearly I can't decide between any of the events in the heptathlon, and I can't decide between being a doctor, an athlete, my other passions surrounding like sustainability, mental health. Why do we have to pick one? Or why do we have to have a favourite? So I'm very keen on advocating for people like pursuing multiple interests and passions in life and making change in multiple areas rather than just, if you want to do one thing and you want to be successful in that one thing and you have that one goal, then do that. But I think the most of us, we're complex creatures, right? We don't like just one thing. So if you want to have multiple careers, if someone tells you you can't do sport and you can't be a dentist at the same time, or you can't do veterinary science or an engineer and do something else alongside it, screw them and do it. So I don't have a favourite. I like everything and everyone sometimes.
I will also be an advocate for that, because I have just decided to flip my life on its head, because I actually want to do what I want to do. And it's scary. It's scary. Don't get me wrong, it is scary, but at the same time, it's way more rewarding on a daily basis than trying to choose one thing permanently, because it's not natural. And I think people think, oh, have I got ADHD because I like doing different things all the time? No, you're actually just like, that's normal. You are normal. And, I tell people all the time, I'm not going to go full-time doctor, I'm going to go part-time because I have other multiple interests alongside. I love, so many people tell me, oh, I'd love to do this, I'd love to write a book, I'd love to do some charity work. I'd love to set up this business, and obviously there's logistical and financial restraints, but if there aren't, or there's ways around it, then just do it. You have one life, just do whatever the heck you want. So no, I do medicine and athletics and everything else, and I'll continue to do that even though I've been told so many times not to. Well, one of the things that I heard this on a motivational video when I was like, I must have been like 16, 17. For those that don't know, I really didn't do well when I was in like sixth form in my A-levels, so I had to retake them. But I decided to retake them while I was doing my second year of exams as well, which was not easy. I was strongly advised not to do it, but I basically cut off a lot of friendships in order to be able to like knuckle down and focus. And the only thing that would actually like motivate me enough every morning to do it was unfortunately listening to incredibly cringe motivational videos.
I've done that.
But they worked for me.
They worked. Great.
And one of the things that has stuck with me from those, and I do find quite interesting, is if you imagine yourself on your deathbed at the end of your life and the room is empty, but the door opens and all of the versions of who you at some point in your life wanted to be walked in, and they're looking at you going, we could have been you, but you just decided not to.
Scary.
The number of times in my life I have thought about doing something and not done it, and I can still think of those things now. The thought of me going through that in my last dying moments of being like, oh, I wish I'd done that, is enough for me to like, today just be like, yeah, we're doing it. Like,
yeah,
we're just
exactly.
Go for it.
And I say that all the time, like, just be a very yes person and don't be fearful of things not going your way. Just go for it. Like, meet people, go do new things, do whatever the heck you want to do, and don't listen to people telling you that you can't be this or you can't do that. Like, just set high goals and go for it, because you just have one life, you know. So I'm sorry to who asked that question, because you didn't actually get an answer, but hopefully you got inspired instead. We'll go with that. I'm sure there's an answer. There's an answer in there.
Now, in terms of looking back, and I've said that I used to watch motivational videos. If I was to give myself some advice when I was younger, I think I'd probably still say to do that because it worked well. But on the case of advice, one of the things we like to do, and the next section of the podcast is where we ask for 3 pieces of advice for a younger version of yourself. So pretend I'm not here anymore. And in this chair is actually someone else, which is a younger version of you. You could be giving 3 pieces of advice to the same version of you. It could be 3 separate versions of you. But what piece of advice would you like to give a younger version of yourself?
Yeah, I think like going on quite well to what we just spoke about is don't have fear, or obviously recognize that fear, but don't act on it, and say yes to everything. Say yes to all the opportunities. If you gain a scholarship elsewhere, go and do it. Go and travel. Go and say, hi to that person that you want to speak to, and just say yes to everything. Don't take any opportunity for granted. So that's my first advice for anybody. Secondly, back yourself. Absolutely back yourself in everything that you do. Believe in yourself, and it just completely changes your outlook and your energy. Like, I don't think I would have got into med school. I don't think I would have gone this far in life, and a lot of opportunities have come my way because of my energy. And I think my energy comes from just genuinely backing myself to the moon. And I don't mean, I'm always right, but back who you are and take those mistakes and failures going forward and learn off people, but back who you are every single time. So that's my second. And the third one, it's a bit of like relationship advice really, is focus on yourself. And when someone else does come into your life, then they should be adding to your life, not taking away. So unfortunately last year I was like in a really unfortunate situation, and I got into like a really abusive relationship. And before that I was with someone for 7 years, and that person didn't take me anywhere, and I focused everything on that person. I said no to scholarships in America, track and field scholarships in America. I said no to a lot of opportunities, a lot of events, and probably had a whole different setup in my life because of that person. And I'd say to any young girl or young boy like 16, 17, focus on yourself. You are your person. And if anyone mistreats you, just walk away. So that's what I wish I could tell my younger self.
I'm glad you brought that in, because it was a topic we discussed that it should be brought in, because it is another thing that can play into your life that you don't necessarily have direct control of, because relationships are a two-way street. So as much as you need to focus on yourself, if you want to be in a healthy relationship, you have to focus on the other person. And if you're not getting the same back, then in actual fact, you're just wasting your energy and you're losing the time that you could be putting in yourself to develop yourself. And it's tough. And I wonder how tough you find it looking back and thinking, I could have taken that scholarship. You seem like quite a grounded person in that you're like, well, I didn't. And so life is what it is. I've still gone on to do some pretty cool things. But it also it's always an opportunity that you end up not taking in as a person who wants to say yes to all of these opportunities. I can appreciate that must hurt a little bit in reflection. Yeah,
absolutely. Like, I'm devastated looking back at, like what I could have been. And sometimes I do think, would I be a better athlete now? Would I be a better person? But, ultimately, like you said, we've got to keep ourselves grounded. I can't do anything about that. I learned a lot about who I am and how much I can love people, and a lot about, my values anyway. And we've just got to move on. Like, I'm still very young, and now I am focusing on myself, and I've learned. But yeah, I think relationships, and it comes into high performance and it comes into mental health, is relationships, not just intimate relationships, but friends and family massively impact who we are and what we do and how much we believe in ourselves, our mental and physical health. So relationships is such a it's something we do chat about. I think it's one of the biggest areas of life that it's really important to get right, and it's really important to keep working on those relationships with other people and yourself, and keeping those boundaries. And again, going back to back yourself when someone's treating you bad. You know, I wish I walked away so much longer ago. And I guess that's something we could talk about now anyway, is like, you know, abusive relationships and how that can impact, you know, your confidence going forward as well. And I just wish so many people knew their value and to walk away and to surround themselves with positivity.
It's really difficult because when you have friends in certain situations, it's a lot easier to have an opinion on their situation than it is on your own. And again, it comes to that point of being able to step back and almost treat yourself as someone that is your closest friend. And what advice would you give them? Which is one of the reasons I like doing the 3 pieces of advice thing. And I'm glad you brought it into that, is because it's not often enough that we give ourselves harsh advice. And so many people that have had some of the biggest revelations that have come onto this podcast have, in one way or another, had a revelation where they've given themselves advice.
Absolutely.
One of the more interesting ones recently was a guy who's currently cycling around the world. It was a couple of episodes back. He was taking mushrooms in a clinical setting to help his mental health. And he had this trip where basically he was having a conversation with himself and he was giving himself advice, and he was able to come out of the trip and he actually still remembered the advice, and it taught him how to give himself harsh advice and actually listen to it. And now he's doing some really cool stuff. But it is understanding that, and I feel like it takes a level of experience. And
totally.
It happens one time and then it becomes a lot more easier to do.
And actually it's really interesting you brought that up, because I think that's what allowed me to leave that relationship last year, and actually I've applied that in a lot of things, and again did it with my sports psychologist, is stepping out when you're really overwhelmed, you know. And you can apply this to things like, if any of you struggle with anxiety and you get panic attacks, step out of the situation, and how would you deal with it as an external view? Like, how would you speak to yourself, and what advice would you give yourself? For example, if I'd said any of the stories that were happening to me during this abusive relationship and how I was being treated, if somebody had told me that, I would be like, are you serious? Are you still saying that? Are you allowing someone to treat you that way? So step out in every situation you're in, you're overwhelmed or it's high pressure environment, being able to step out. And I guess that comes back to the red pill, blue pill. Go back to that blue and remain calm and control what you can, and step out from the situation.
Awesome. Now we do have one more section on the podcast before we get into a bit of a wrap up, and that is the previous guest question. So this is not an original idea, but it's an idea I like. So I have every guest ask a question for the next guest without knowing anything about who they are or what they do. So the previous guest I mentioned already was called Charlotte. She has had a pretty interesting journey herself, but she's ended up getting into the sport of high rocks, having nearly lost her life to a life-threatening condition. So she fought back from that, and as a result, her priorities in her life have changed dramatically. So she wanted to ask you, how have your priorities changed since you started competing in sport and when you were younger?
So I think my priorities when I was young was it was more selfish. And obviously going back to, you should focus on yourself, right? But I think you should focus on yourself to do good to others. I think when I was young, I used to say I want to win this race because I want to win this race, or I want to get better myself. Now my priorities are, I want to do well in life. I want to be a good doctor, and I want to be a good track athlete so I can show people this, that, and that. And I know what my whys are now, and I know I want to do well so I can, improve others. So that's how my priorities change. It's shifted. The goal is the same. It's my own performance and me as a person, but my why has changed.
Amazing. No, I think that's a good answer. But obviously I need to follow that up with asking you what your question will be for the next guest. It doesn't have to necessarily be deep. We have had some silly questions about cheesecake versus donuts. Is one of my favorite silly questions. But what would you like to ask the next guest without knowing a single thing about who they are?
Probably kind of touching on what I just mentioned is, what is your why? Because I just think once you know your why, and if that guest doesn't know their why, then hopefully it'll transcend them into a whole new world. But I think once you know what your why is, it just impacts on everything else. Like even going back to the questions previously of why do you keep going during setbacks? Once you know what your why is and why you're getting up every day, and you know what to break it down, you know what to set your goals, and it just changes everything. So what's your why?
Very interestingly, I was thinking about this yesterday. And I think that's the question that I would want to pass on to someone, because I find it so interesting, because everyone's why is usually so different. And if you're sat there thinking, oh, my why feels pretty generic, it's just because, you know, I want to do this better, that's probably not your actual why.
Exactly.
You find out what your why is when things are really bad.
Yeah.
And
I know
the thing
that.
and the thing is, you need it.
Yeah.
And knowing that that's what it is, and once you do know what it is, you can draw on it a lot earlier on before things get so bad, and you can pull through. So I definitely encourage people to find their actual why.
Yeah.
And so I am looking forward to knowing with this next person that is coming on what their why is.
No, it's interesting. And when you say that, most people, you find your why when you're in the dumps, like when you are literally at rock bottom. Like, I'd say I've been near rock bottom a few times in my life. Like I said, I've gone through a lot. I've gone through literally so much. But then last year, doing that abusive relationship, I was on the floor, and that has just completely changed my life. So in some ways, thank you. Really grateful, because I love who I am now and everything that I do, and I'm just so excited for life.
This is huge as well. A lot of people will go through quite a lot of shit stuff in their life, but they end up being quite thankful for all the shit stuff happening.
I'm so thankful. I'm like, you tried to tie me down, but you've literally, because he was like, he actually told me not to go to podcasts, and here I am. So he was like, oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't be like that, and you're not going to be a doctor. And I'm here doing it all. So thank you.
There we go. That's all we need sometimes. And like you said,
take the shit and use it.
Yeah.
Build a house.
So it's shit at the time, but in future you can build a house off it. Yeah, there you go.
Don't get me wrong. I wish I, didn't have to go through that, but you have to take what comes, and find your why and be a better person after it. Yeah, that's what life's about, isn't it?
There we go. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of this episode, and you've been fantastic. I feel like we've covered a lot of things there, and hopefully everyone listening to this has gained some benefit from all of those different things that you're actively doing. Even though you've been injured for the last few months, you wouldn't know, because you've been so active in doing so many other things in your life. And a big thanks again for making the trip down and jumping on the podcast. What I would love to do, and I say this to most guests, is at some point, as you get further into your career, do a recap, see how things are going, see how things have changed.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So hopefully we can do that again in future. Now, for everyone that is watching, listening, where can they find you if they don't already know where to find you? Not in the physical sense, by the way. I'm talking social media here.
Yeah, so I'm mostly on Instagram, just my full name, Lauryn Davey. And yeah, on there I'll just showcase my life, and I do follow my athletics performance, but everything else that we've discussed today. So yeah, mostly on there, a little bit of TikTok. I think my handle is the same for everything, and even Twitter. I don't really post much on there, but yeah, if you just chuck my full name in, even into Google, you'll find stuff.
Likewise, any of the content that's on the Mindsets page will have Lauryn tagged. So go and check it out. I also have the same handles for everything. So it's at mindsets_podcast. So go, like I said, drop it a follow, drop it a share. If you feel like you've got some value out of this and you think someone else that you know could, do them a favor, do me a favor, and give it a share as well. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you here, Lauryn, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you guys listening, join in with the conversation. So a massive thank you, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode. With